Our housing system is broken. Record numbers of children are trapped in temporary accommodation and homelessness is rising. Not only is this damaging to the health and well-being of those experiencing these appalling conditions, but the knock-on effects are felt throughout our society, in our schools, in our workplaces, and of course, on our streets. We know that education, employment, and health outcomes are all linked to our fundamental need for homes that we can thrive in. And as the member has already said today, this basic need is also our right. And because housing is devolved, there's no excuse for this Parliament not to act. Because the housing emergency we are facing is entirely avoidable. What it needs is political will from the government and the resources to tackle it. Presiding officer, who was that? Oh, Ben. Yeah, I'll take an intervention from Ben.
Ben McPherson.
Just a quick intervention. I'm yet to hear any suggestions about moving capital resource from one part of the budget into housing, and I genuinely would be interested to hear of any
Mercedes
proposals.
Vialba.
If the member is suggesting a meeting to discuss how we can use public investment to generate wealth for the whole of society, I'll be very happy to take that meeting. Presiding officer, in the private sector, tenants are repeatedly faced with landlords who are reluctant to make improvements to the quality of housing, despite continuing to charge excessively high rents. This leaves tenants bearing the costs of rising energy bills and of living with damp and mouldy housing and of the stress of choosing whether to heat or to eat. But it's not just tenants who pay. The housing emergency impacts us all. And our cash-strapped local authorities are having to pay the private sector to house people in temporary accommodation for years at a time, while they and the Scottish Government also provide grants to pay private energy bills to try to prevent people having to leave their homes in the first place. We are looking at the widespread use of public funds being spent to enrich the private sector, every penny of which could be better spent on upgrading and expanding our council housing stock. Presiding officer, as my colleague Mark Griffin has detailed, local authorities would hugely benefit from being able to provide more affordable council housing. And an industrial strategy for housing could see the creation of many well-paid, secure, unionised jobs to build and maintain the homes we so desperately need. So if the First Minister truly aims to deliver a green, well-being economy that reduces poverty, this must start by ensuring that every person in Scotland has a warm, secure home that they can afford to live in. But the current pace of retrofitting old housing stock and of building new homes is not meeting government targets or public demand. And local authorities are struggling to provide homelessness support while their resources are stretched so thin. So the government must work with councils, but crucially, it must provide fair funding to fulfil these ambitions. So that's why Labour welcomes the Scottish Government's move to increase council tax on second homes. But the government has had this power since April 2013, and it's taken a decade to now decide to consult on this once again. Presiding officer, it cannot be another decade before we actually see this measure implemented. Yeah. So to conclude, we are faced with an emergency in housing, the scale of which can only be addressed with a response of the same magnitude. That means a coordinated mass rollout of council house buyback, retrofitting and building. This is the only way to ensure public money, our money, is being spent on what people need most: warm, secure, affordable homes, not subsidised private profits for a select few.